A basement under a hardware store on Broadway. Chalk dust on a wooden platform. 225 pounds on the bar, and nobody else in the room. I pulled that weight off the floor every Tuesday for 30 years. At 62, my hands opened on their own, and the bar came down. The doctor said what they say to a man at 62. The part of me that failed that morning was not the muscle. Have you had a morning where your grip quit on something you have carried your whole life? Put it in the comments. This is what Pantheon Gym covers. Subscribe so you catch the next one. Muscle does not sit loose in your arm. Every single fiber is wrapped in a sheath. Bundles of those fibers get wrapped again. The whole muscle is wrapped a third time, and then it is tied into the bone at both ends by the same material. That material is collagen. Collagen is roughly 30% of all the protein in your body. A man of about 154 pounds is carrying somewhere near 3,700 grams of it, and about 1,600 of those grams are sitting inside his bones. It is the most common protein you own. I ran a gym for 41 years, and I never heard one man say the word out loud. Here is what that sheath does for you. A muscle fiber does not pull on your bone. It pulls on the wrapping. The wrapping pulls on the tendon. The tendon pulls on the bone, and somewhere in that chain, a signal becomes a lift. Feed the fiber all the protein you want. If the wrapping has gone slack, the force leaves the muscle and never arrives at the bar. That is why grip goes without warning. I trained the same men down there for 41 years. 3 generations of steelworkers came down those stairs, and the ones who held on were never the ones you would have picked at 40. The strongest man I ever had quit at 55 and was leaning on a cane by 68. There was a skinny electrician in my room who never pulled more than 225 in his life. At 81, that man was still splitting and carrying his own firewood. Nobody would have bet $1 on the electrician. I would not have. I kept a notebook on that room for most of those years. Names, ages, what a man could still get off the floor the week he turned 70. 41 years of it, and the pattern in my notebook never once matched the one printed in the magazines. Go and test yourself right now, before the rest of this makes sense. Hold a full gallon of milk straight out at arm's length and count to 10. If your hand opens before you get there, I am talking to you. The clock on this is not gentle. After 60, a man loses about 1% of his muscle every year, and after 70, that rate doubles to about 2%. The part that makes no sense to me is the advice attached to those numbers. Every man I know was told to drink more protein. Not one of them was ever told what the protein was supposed to be building into. Because the wrapping is made of something your whey powder barely contains. Collagen has a strange recipe. Every third position along the chain is occupied by the same amino acid, and about 33% of the entire protein is made of it. That amino acid is glycine. Your body does make glycine. It builds it out of another amino acid called serine, using a single enzyme step, and that step runs at a fixed ratio. You cannot open the valve wider by wanting more. A Spanish biochemist named Enrique Melendez-Javia ran the arithmetic on that in 2009 and published it in the Journal of Biosciences. His team put your own production at roughly 3 grams a day. A normal diet adds somewhere between 1.5 and 3 grams on top. The demand, mostly for collagen, comes to about 10 grams a day beyond that. You are running a shortfall in the most abundant protein in your body every day, and eating cleaner does not close it. His paper argued glycine should be reclassified as essential for exactly that reason. Every other shortfall in a man's diet has a fix waiting in the grocery store. This one has a ceiling built into the enzyme. So look at what is in the tub you already bought. Whey is the best leucine source on the shelf. and I will not pretend otherwise. It carries about 34.96 grams of essential amino acids and branched-chain amino acids per 100 grams. Collagen protein carries 19.4. On the measure the supplement industry sells you on, Whey wins outright. Now turn the label over. Collagen protein runs over 20 grams of glycine per 100 grams. Whey carries less than a 14th of that. You have been buying the signal that tells muscle to grow and almost none of the material it grows into. That gap is not my opinion. Which part bothers you more, that Whey is missing it, or that nobody selling you Whey has ever brought it up? Ray Dombrowski pulled 315 off the floor in my basement at 71 years old. He never bought a supplement in his life. What he kept in the cupboard was a box out of the baking aisle that cost him under $1. 30-odd years later, a German research team went and tested the same thing properly. Denise Ziblick and Daniel Koenig at the University of Freiburg took 53 men with diagnosed sarcopenia, average age 72.2 years. Every man lifted 3 times a week for 12 weeks under supervision. Half got 15 grams of collagen peptides a day. Half got a placebo. They measured with a DEXA scanner, not a tape measure. The collagen group gained more lean mass, lost more fat, and got measurably stronger than the men doing the identical training on placebo. The published difference in fat-free mass between the two groups came to about 1.3 kilograms. Then the argument started, and this is the part I think you should hear. Stuart Phillips, Kevin Tipton, Luke Van Loon, and 3 other researchers wrote into the same journal to say the result was too good. Their calculation put that difference at 2.7 and 5.6 times larger than the pooled effect of protein supplementation across 2 separate meta-analyses. They did not accuse anybody of anything. They said a number that size does not usually survive being tested again. There is one more thing on that paper. 10 years after publication, in September 2025, the journal ran a correction, adding that part of the study costs were paid by Gelatin, a company that manufactures collagen peptides, and that a co-author is named on a related patent application. I read that, and I do not throw the study out. I read it, and I think, a man who spends his time yelling about the supplement industry buying its own answers has an obligation to say so out loud when it happens on the study that helps his case, which leaves a harder question than the science does. If this was known well enough to test in 2015, who knew it first? Somebody knew in 1890. That year, a man named Charles Knox worked out how to granulate gelatin so it came in a box, instead of you boiling animal feet for a day and straining the result through a cloth. When he died in 1908, his wife Rose took the company over, and she sold America on gelatin as the cheap way to stretch a meal and add protein straight through the Depression. By the 1950s, that same company was printing something called the Knox protein drink. Gelatin stirred into water, juice, milk, or broth taken between meals. A spoon of it in a glass, 40 years before any of this had a research literature behind it. Then, in the late 1990s, the company took it seriously. Nabisco, which owned Knox by then, paid for a study at Ball State University on athletes with knee pain. David Pearson, an associate professor there who consulted for the company, reported that the supplement had a significant positive effect on reducing knee pain over 8 weeks. Pearson said something else in that interview worth holding on to. If there is one thing that sidelines an athlete quicker than anything else, it is a joint problem. Knox put the product in a can and called it NutriJoint. And then it was gone. I have looked for the paperwork that explains why, and I have not found it. What I can tell you is what carried on after the can disappeared. In 2008, Christine Clark and her colleagues at Penn State ran 147 athletes on 10 grams a day of collagen hydrolysate against a placebo for 24 weeks and reported real improvement in joint pain and mobility. In 2017, Keith Barr's lab at the University of California, Davis, published the study that explains the mechanism. 8 men took either 5 grams or 15 grams of gelatin in a drink carrying 48 milligrams of vitamin C 1 hour before 6 minutes of rope skipping. On the 15-gram dose, the marker for new collagen in their blood rose 153%. On placebo and on the 5-gram dose, it moved between 54 and 59%. The vitamin C is not decoration. Your body cannot assemble collagen without it, and those men drank it in the same glass. The honest caveat belongs here, too. That 153% is a blood marker. It is not a lift, it is not a walking speed, and it is not a man carrying his own firewood at 81. Nobody has run the trial that closes the gap between them. Here is the part nobody was ever paid to advertise. A box of unflavored gelatin in the baking aisle cost about 53 cents for a 10-gram serving. The peptide version, in a tub with a scoop on top, runs closer to $1. Same animal, same process. The only real difference is the gelatin needs hot liquid and will set into a gel when it cools, while the peptides dissolve into anything. That is why it goes in coffee, not tradition, chemistry. Both trials that matter had one thing in common, and I am not going to hide it from you. The Freiburg men lifted 3 times a week for 12 weeks. Clark's subjects were competing athletes. Nobody in either study got the result out of a spoon by itself. After 41 years of watching men come down my stairs, that is the only conclusion I trust. The gelatin was never the thing. It was the material the work was missing. Look at what actually happened here across 130 years. A cheap box sat in the baking aisle the whole time. The research kept confirming it at Penn State and at Davis. The one company that tried to sell it as medicine pulled the can and walked away, and nothing replaced it, because there is no patent on a commodity and no margin in telling a man to buy something for 53 cents. Once you understand that nobody advertises what nobody owns, you will start reading everything else in that cupboard the same way. That is what Pantheon Gym does. Subscribe, and you will catch the next one.